So I have a long question here, so I'm just going to summarize it a little bit and put the rest in the description. The person is saying, in 2018 I went through psychosis. It began with insights regarding consciousness. Writing equations, drawing symbols, and mind-shattering series of synchronicities followed. Ultimately, I came to believe that particular elements of the experience were evil, and I asked that a family friend baptize me. The symptoms rapidly diminished thereafter. I was diagnosed with bipolar, but after several years now believe that psychiatry has no concept of what they are actually dealing with. And then the person describes how he or she went through a process of dissolving what I call subconscious selves. And this helped in the raising of consciousness. And then for the last 5 years, I've been relatively isolated, working as little as possible and reading or listening to whatever felt truest at the time. I believe the last subconscious cells that were keeping me bound to isolation have finally started to resolve, and I now see my next step as a return to life in all its frightful reality. It's as though myself and the external world are interacting for the first time, or at least that the self I feel myself to be is coming to understand that it does in fact have a bridge into the world and a corresponding creative capacity. If you have any thoughts, advice, or resources to come to mind that might assist me with this understanding, it would be much appreciated. Well, yes. Let's first look at this isolation. I have, over the years, I've been on a spiritual path, met many spiritual people with that kind of a reaction where you really just want to isolate yourself from the world. And I'm not saying there can't be a certain aspect of it that's people that just want to run away from their problems and don't want to deal with them. But I think for many spiritual people, it's that we have what I call these very deep traumas from past lives. And I have a whole playlist called Avatar Psychology. And if you haven't watched that, I recommend that if this resonates with you, you watch that playlist. Because what I'm talking about there is that many of us who are spiritual people came to Earth as avatars who volunteered to come here to have a positive impact on the planet. And we were often very severely put down by certain beings and exposed to this trauma, very severe trauma. And it can cause us to doubt why we are here. Do we have any purpose? Do we have any right to be here? And this can be so painful that we want to isolate ourselves. And this can last for many, many lifetimes. I mean, there are some people where it's basically lasted ever since they came, which could have been a very long time ago. So, to me, it sounds like this is what's going on with many people like that. You basically have created what I call the primal self and other selves that you created in reaction to this trauma. And it has been so painful that you haven't been able to deal with it. So what the person is describing is that he or she went through a process of dealing with it by dissolving the selves, but not being able to do that at the same time as functioning in society. And that's what I've seen in many spiritual people. I remember both in Transcendental Meditation and Summit Lighthouse, the organization was so big they had people working for the organization. Some people worked as volunteers, they worked for this room and board. But there were people who did this. So they were in a very structured environment, they just had fairly simple tasks to do, and they were functioning that way, but at the same time they were working on their psychology, healing their psychology, however conscious they were of it. So I'm not saying that couldn't have been exactly what the person is going through. And now the person is describing like, it's like enough selves have been dissolved that the person can now go out into society again. And that's what I would consider should be the most constructive outcome. So in other words, if you had this need to isolate yourself, it should be a phase in your life. I've talked about in several videos we have a life plan. And part of that life plan is to heal psychology, and then the other part is to actively go out and make some contribution to society. Whatever it may be. I'm not saying it needs to be some grandiose thing. But so many people, many spiritual people, we want to get the psychology out of the way first. And that's why we sometimes, withdraw from the world, say, I can't, I work as little as possible to survive, and I'm just, because they're focusing on the psychology. What I would say is, I have seen many people who go into thinking they're not really directly working on their psychology. They think that practicing a spiritual practice and studying a spiritual teaching, that's enough. And maybe it is, but you could make a lot faster progress by working directly with your psychology, using some of the teachings I've given on my websites and on my YouTube videos, where you work on these subconscious selves. You can make a lot faster progress. You can also make a lot faster progress by invoking light from the Ascended Masters and asking for their help. So anyway, but what I'm saying is, you have this period where you work on the psychology first, and then there comes, it should be a natural phase that as you have made progress, you want to go out in society. And this is partly because you might have a contribution to make, but also because when you are in isolation, you can work on psychology, you can heal, but there are certain things you can't resolve in your psychology if you're isolated. Why? Because there's nobody who pushes your buttons. See, you have this ideal that's projected out. I remember it in TM especially, in Transcendental Meditation it was said, okay, the Maharishi, who started the Transcendental Meditation movement, he was the student of a certain guru, and at a certain point the Maharishi withdrew into a cave in the Himalayas, and he basically meditated night and day for 12 years. And then when he came out of meditation, out of that period, he had the Transcendental Meditation technique and was ready to go out and do his public mission. So this was by some people seen as an ideal, but I don't see it that way, because when you are sitting in a cave in the Himalayas, you're in a very controlled environment. What's challenging you? What's bringing up your subconscious reactions, your reactionary selves, your subconscious self? What's pushing your buttons? So that's why I'm saying you can have people who need to have this very protected phase for a while. But if you want to make maximum progress, there comes a point where now you have to go out just to bring things up in your psychology. That's the next layer you need to work on. So that you can look at your reactions to other people and dealing with other people, dealing with the world, and then work on those subconscious selves that you couldn't see while you were in isolation. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this, right? I understand that if people are very deeply hurt and traumatized, they can need the peace and quiet and the protected environment in order to heal. But if that process is successful, it should be as the person describes. You come to a point where you feel this is enough, now you need to go out again. But the need to go out is also a matter of resolving psychology, because now you have a chance to see the things that you couldn't see while you were isolated because nobody pushed your buttons. So if you go out with the attitude that it's about seeing what I need to work on in my psychology, you will make a lot faster progress. You'll make it a lot easier for yourself, because otherwise your reactionary patterns will go take over. And you might resist a lot of things, or you might be so scared you go back into isolation. And I've seen people who live isolated their whole lives and make very little, if any, spiritual progress. So that's obviously not a pattern you want to continue. But as I said, on something like this, I would say, watch my Avatar Psychology playlist and see where that takes you. And then use some of the tools to resolve these very deep traumas, going back to this primal self. And I think you will find that it will have a major effect on your well-being.